Council work study session for Tuesday, February 18th. Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we've got some special guests tonight. We've got Joel Warren, and we have Shannon Bowman and Bonnie Tufts joining us from Kitsap County and the Black Grant program that we participate in. So I'm certain that they have maybe a presentation, or is it just a discussion? Okay. All right, the clerk's dialing it up right now for us.
Do you want to go over our guiding principles in there?
I could.
I was just following down the line here.
All right, so there's no actions tonight,
No,
so,
right.
but I'm just remind us of our guiding principles are we raising the bar in our actions? Are we honoring the past but not living in the past? Are we building positive connections with our community and outside partners? I think we are tonight. And is the decision-making process building a diverse, equitable, and inclusive community? All right.
Thank you. So we wanted to come and talk with you all about our consolidated planning process that we're in the process of this year, and we'll be submitting the plan to HUD in November. So if we can just take you through what that is, and so things that we'll talk about with you today are what funds are involved in the process, how do we allocate them on an annual basis, what the consolidated plan is, what is the timeline, and how can you contribute to this one. So with that, we'll get started. Community Development Block Grant Funds, so for those of you that don't know much about those are a federal source of funds. The county receives those annually from the Department of Housing and Urban Development. They're funds that are to support housing, viable communities, economic development, to support low and moderate income persons. So those are people at or below 80% of area median income for this area. We receive about $1 million annually, and the county's allocation excludes the city of Bremerton. Bremerton is its own entitlement.
And if we could get our own entitlement, we
Yeah.
choose not to. It would be about 150,000-ish, plus or
Yeah,
minus.
we've probably gone down a little bit, but yeah, so just to touch on that a little bit, every 3 years, the county has to go through a requalification process with HUD. So this year will be the year we do it again. So we send out letters to all of the cities to see if they want to continue to participate as part of the urban county. We have interlocal agreements that are auto renewal, and so if you want to participate, you just let us know that. If you choose not to participate, you can the city can apply for funds through the state process, but it does limit the ability for projects that are located in the city, because then you cannot apply for funds through the county. So it kind of excludes you in that way.
So, so if we chose to have our own program, fortunately, we would need to employ all these people, just like these fine people, and it wouldn't go very far. If
It's an administratively expensive program. There are a lot of regulations tied to it. Nick, you've seen some of those just going through the process. There's NEPA environmental review, there's Davis-Bacon federal prevailing wages, now there's Build America, Buy America, Section 3, and on and on and on. So it is very cumbersome funds, and it doesn't make it easy for agencies for the type of projects that they come in for.
So we greatly appreciate our partnership with you. So I was
Yeah, and we appreciate our partnership with you too. So that is one source of funds, and it's used for a variety of types of projects like housing acquisition and rehabilitation, both homeownership and rental housing. Public services, public facilities, those are a little more complicated. Economic development, microenterprise. So as I mentioned, it has to benefit low and moderate income persons. So every project has to tie back to that objective. And so the ways to do that are whether it's located in an area that we can do census tracts, like when we did stuff with Port Orchard. Based on those census tracts, 51% are low income, or it's income qualification or presumed benefit. There are certain populations that HUD says these are presumed benefit and qualify as low income.
So last time we had a successful project in that program would have been the sidewalk project that we did on Lippert, where we were doing a roadway. We had rebuilding the roadway. We had sections of sidewalks, but not a complete street. And so we funded a complete street project there. So we connected sidewalks from Sydney all the way down to Pottery. And because of the number of low-income individuals living in that neighborhood, that's how we were able to connect the dots and have a successful grant application.
And provide the accessibility with the
Yes.
sidewalks. So it was great.
Some of the items on your third bullet point, like housing acquisition, that sounds almost like KCR. Do they get funds separately from the CDBG, or is that something different?
So our funds go out,
Okay.
and we'll touch on this, but through an annual process. So KCR does receive funding for some of
Yeah,
the.
but it goes to you and then it goes to them.
Yep.
Okay.
So the other.
Recording in progress.
Program. The other federal funds that the county receives is the Home Investment Partnership Funds. Those are to provide permanent affordable housing, can be homeownership, rental housing, and those are to support folks at 80% below area median income. And then the city doesn't receive a separate grant, but because they are an entitlement, they have a percentage that HUD has a percentage that they come out with annually, and they tell us what that percentage is. So currently it's 29%. And then the other pot of funds that we're happy to have as part of the mix now and doesn't have all those strings attached is the Community Investments in Affordable Housing. That's our CIA funds. And those also bring together the county and the city of Port Orchard and Bremerton for the two sales and use tax funds. So we work really closely with Joel, who manages that program, for all of our capital projects, from the application process through contracting and working with agencies. Those funds are not prioritized for Paulsville and Bainbridge Island. They have chosen to keep their own funds. That pot gives us about $5.5 million annually, so it does increase what's available for affordable housing. And it's can also be used for some facility-related projects. So there are some facilities that are eligible. So with that, we'll go to the next slide. So this is how we get the funds out to like KCR that you were mentioning. We call it the Coordinated Grant Application Process. It's an annual competitive process. It begins in the spring each year. We post policy plans which outline priorities. So that's what we're talking about with this consolidated planning process. We will develop the priorities that will guide funding for the next 5 years. So we are currently working with the 2021 to 2025 consolidated plan. So this year's application that opens in the spring will be year 1 of the new consolidated plan. The policy plan, we post that for a 15-day comment period, and we do hold a public hearing on that. The RFPs and NOFAs are posted in the spring, so typically in May, we use an online application so that's where the coordinated comes in. So City of Bremerton, their CDBG program uses it, our mental health tax funds uses it, and the housing and homelessness programs use it. So what we do is try to make sure that we use one organization application. So KCR, for example, if they were coming in for multiple applications to different funds, they only have to submit that piece one time, and then they can apply to different pots for different types of projects. The Capital Grant Recommendation Committee has representatives from each city, each commissioner district, and one at large. So that's one way the city of Port Orchard participates, is appointing people to the Grant Recommendation Committee. I refer to the Capital Grant Recommendation Committee because that's where our funds are going through, but the housing and homelessness has a separate cycle and they use the services. So thank you, Mayor, for making your appointments for this year. When the applications come in, the county, our staff determines project eligibility, and we typically know that ahead of time. We meet with agencies, we ask for an application intent form so that we can talk about projects. Then the county staff and the Grant Recommendation Committee will evaluate and score applications, and then the committee deliberates to allocate funding. The funding recommendations are posted for 30-day comment period and forwarded to the board of county commissioners, where we have a public hearing. And so the timeline, policy plans are posted in May, applications will open in June, close in mid-July, and then in September is when the committee really goes through the applications with us, and then deliberates. And it'll be later in September when those recommendations come out. So I'm going to turn it over to Joel to take it from
Awesome.
there.
I'll buzz through some of these. So these next like 3-ish slides are mostly just like the functionality of how the plan works. So when we say con plan, talking like the 5-year plan, then the linkages are there. So the 5-year plan is like the main guiding document. Then off of that we'll have annual plans, policy plans, annual action plans, and then the citizen participation plan. All those things really like get information back to the 5-year plan. So when we submit a plan in November to HUD, it'll have estimated goals, priorities, outcomes per goal, all the things that we expect to accomplish in 5 years. Then each year we'll do policy plans, action plans, and capers that funnel back to that plan. So for the next 5 years, when you hear annual action plan, caper, any of those words, it's always going to refer back to that comp plan. So that's why it's nice to get in front of you all too now. So this happens once every 5. So it's good to gather data, gather input about priorities, needs, markets. So that's kind of where we are right now in the phase. They're kind of self-explanatory what they are, but policy plan is what it sounds like. Every year we put out program guidelines. It doesn't change all that much, but it's more about like the nitty-gritty of contracting, all the things that run the program. The caper is just a reflection of the past year presented to HUD. And now that SIA program is what I run. That's outside of the HUD funds, but we kind of weave those together as much as we can. So the caper you'll see is both SIA outcomes plus all the HUD funding together. The action plan is just really specifics. So we'll describe projects at that level and what funding is going into that. Again, reflecting back to the 5-year plan always. The participation plan is really just guiding what we do to amend things, what we're required to do for outreach each year, all the things that HUD tells us to do, how to engage the community to make sure we're doing projects that make sense. Any questions on what a con plan is, process? It's not super interesting all the time. But
How many pages is it? Is it like a phone book?
the con plan itself is like 300 pages. It's things that people don't usually read. So we do try to put out a summary that is like 8 pages of like, these are the goals, these are the priorities, this is the funding. So look for that. And same with the caper document, like the reflection of the year is like 80 pages, but we'll do like a 4-page. Here were the goals, here were the activities, and here's the funding. Yeah.
Are we gonna cover the plan? Are you gonna go through, like, what are your top 3 goals out of the last 5-year plan?
Right now?
Yeah.
So they'll come out in the paper, which will be,
Come out
Yeah.
in mid-March.
yeah, it'll be in a few weeks.
So, like, I mean, if we were to rank the top 3 things that we're doing on that in 5 years, you know, because we're coming up to the end of that 5-year plan,
Yeah.
have we accomplished those?
In the paper?
In our goals in our current consolidated.
Yeah.
Yeah, housing was the #1 priority, and
Yeah, but I mean, there's not a lot of money to go
Yeah.
along to really make any impact.
thankfully, this
Yeah.
pot came along, but it was slow for a period of time, you know, COVID hit and
But
all
we'll
that.
exceed, we will exceed
will exceed
our
our
housing
numbers.
goals for sure.
I
in
think
the
we
plan.
will exceed all of our numbers.
Yeah, I think so too.
And then who's our representative?
So we have 2. On the housing side is Chris Stansberry, and Chris has been doing that role for 10 years or more. She predates, you know, at least me being the mayor. And if I can't find anybody to do the services, once in a while Chris will step in, but she prefers just to do the capital. We had Rochelle LeMay last year served in that capacity on the services. She moved out of the city, and so Lee Higgs volunteered so she's brand new this year and is excited, and I told her she should watch this presentation tonight when I saw her earlier today.
You're 3 years into this current plan? Is that
Yeah,
correct?
so we're starting year 5. So we've completed 3. 4 is 2024, then it's completed.
So
So, yeah, we just completed your.
how frequent, how often are you measuring your progress in this 5-year plan?
So every year the paper comes out, so every year, so year 1 will be 2027. So at the end of, so March 2027, we'll be submitting the first paper for this comp plan.
Okay.
And then that goes every year. So every year in
Yearly.
March, we submit, yeah.
So next March, we will submit the last
Yeah.
paper for the current consolidated plan.
Yeah, so it's on the federal timing cycle, which is all fun, but it's always in March. Always expect that paper in March.
Okay.
Yeah.
Forgive me if you've already covered this. What determines the amount of dollars allocated to the county? Is it population-based? What determines?
For SIA, so SIA is all sales tax. So it's just 1/10 of 1% of sales and use tax from unincorporated not Paulsbo, Port Orchard and Bremerton. Paulsbo and Bainbridge collect their own. So that's for SIA. And then for HUD though, there is a formula they use annually.
Yes, population. Would that be the same for the city versus the county?
Several things.
Yeah,
It'd be the same formula. Yeah.
Same formula?
It'd be the
Okay.
same formula used.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is.
It's
Poverty rate.
Yeah, it's
it's-
population, overcrowded housing, and several different measures that HUD uses, so they're looking at census data,
Sure.
and then they crank it into a formula.
So when you do your budget, I mean, are you presenting the amount of dollars that you need first, or are they giving you a set amount of dollars and you're budgeting that?
So every year when we do our cycles,
Okay.
or like the number I had up there, we do it based on our current allocation. So all of the awards made in the fall are estimates. So our 2025 awards that were made last fall, of course, we don't have a federal budget. We have no idea what's gonna come out of it. So those projections were on 2024 funds, and then we always put contingencies in there for if there's increases and decreases, what does the committee want us to do with the funds?
So it's a bucket of dollars that are like our lodging tax process, that there's an application and a competitive process. And the committee formulates what projects ranks them and.
For sure, and I'm thinking the same thing, right? Like a lot of that even in LTAC.
Yeah.
It really isn't like earth-changing to any one organization, right? There's not a lot of dollars. That's just like, when I look at these numbers you're saying, it's like, that's not even covering, Pendleton Place or some of the things that the county has done that I would think we would be able to easily give all this money to one project.
Yeah, and what happens often, especially before SIA came into the CIPOC does give us the ability to start contracting right away, because that money is in the bank, that one's known, where the federal funds are unknown.
That is true though, so I mean, last year for CA, we awarded just 4 contracts
Okay.
for $6 million.
Okay,
So
good.
those are the bigger
Good,
awards that
impactful.
then go leverage greater commerce dollars or tax credits, right?
Thanks.
Yeah.
But there are some things that CIA can't, put money into that CDBG can't. So that's
Yeah,
why
yeah,
people,
Yeah.
still come after it. But yes, the idea would be to give more money to projects, but the downside of that is when you hit certain thresholds, then some of those regulations kick in. So some people want to stay just under that.
So I know we're at time. I'll buzz through these next pieces. I think it's probably more fruitful to get to the survey. Maybe if you have thoughts on priorities, reports that you've seen that you'd like us to integrate, maybe less stuff on what is a con plan. We kind of touched on this already. So generally the con plan is it's a HUD required document. SIA is joining in the planning process just because the point of the con plan is to uncover needs, markets, trends, all those things. And the home funds overlap super well with SIA. SIA, I've kind of made it to be the home program with just way less regulations, which is a bigger pot of money, easier to access. It's a 5-year plan like we talked about with the city of Bremerton. They receive their own home funds, but still managed by the county. Kind of touched on this. I view the con plan as getting 2 needs through 2 things. There's HUD provided data, it's ACS, but it's always a couple years old. So we'll supplement that with Zillow data, just newer data to find markets. And then community outreach. So presentations like this, we'll put a survey out there. We have the links and the QR codes to put it out to agencies and individuals both. And then we share those codes, and then also we present like COC meetings, other existing or regional organizations will be there too to make sure they're aware that we're doing a new plan. Tell us what you think your needs are if you have reports already. We often find as we're doing our planning process, other organizations in either the service or housing space have done planning processes in the last 3 years. So sometimes it's easy just to piggyback off of what they've already done. And then to also honor what their priorities are. Good, next slide. Almost spent my time. So really, I guess if you're a visual person, like you view the con plan as pieces, I guess. So the process is this community outreach, all of that work. Needs assessment and market analysis are really just data driven. So if you do choose to read the 300-page phone book, there'll be 200 pages of data tables and all kinds of different things, but ultimately it boils down to that 5-year strategic plan. So what are the priorities? What are your actual strategies? What are you funding at the project level? That's way more important, but kind of all those chunks contribute to the bigger 5-year plan. Next slide. The timeline, so we're still in that January, March, gathering information, gathering reports, analyzing Zillow, HUD data, all of those things. April, May, we'll get into the policy plans and the RFP process. We'll have established priorities for this coming funding cycle. May, September, kind of what Bonnie talked about, that whole coordinated grant process will start in May and it goes through August and September. I think scoring will happen in August, and then September it's mostly finalized, October it's published. And then in November we'll be submitting both the con plan, the 5-year plan, and the action plan to HUD. Next slide. Just a kind of a summary of the outreach, and then open to hear your feedback if there are other organizations you want us to reach out to. When we say consultations, it's both email, phone calls, in-person meetings, whatever that is for them too. So we make sure we reach out to all our housing providers, the housing authorities. We'll be in some way getting input from the COC, so all the service providers, government input. So we'll be doing this kind of presentation at every city throughout the county, and then also with the commissioners. And then there's a survey link next, but that can go to both agencies and individuals. The questions are very similar. But if you say you're with the agency, it'll ask a couple different questions. And it's open-ended at the end.
I got a question on the public, for your survey with the public. What's the percentage on that of people actually, doing the survey? The community, instead of these different other agencies?
Oh, I mean, I think it ends up being way more from the public,
Yeah.
yeah, than agencies.
Mhm.
I put a limit on the agencies, so only one agency can do it at a time. So if you say you are like KMHS, that can only happen one time.
Oh, okay.
But from the public is way more. I think this morning I checked, it got launched officially this morning through all of our emails, the county emails. I think there's like 60 people after a couple hours. So I think it's mostly people.
Oh, good.
And we asked for income too, so it'll be interesting to see at the very end, like who's answering the survey, which income brackets, that can help us do some outreach. It's open to the end of March, so I think in a few weeks we can do some brief analysis to see where we're reaching. And the next slide is really just more on the survey. Kind of already talked about what we do with all of this. So all the survey, the needs assessment, all the data stuff, all the analysis we do, we put into a draft. That draft we published in September, but before then too, we can make tweaks to things. We can always receive more information. So if you have a new report or whatever you want us to include, feel free to send it our way. And then last slide, I think it's just,
Oh, yeah, we just threw some projects up there, just so you can see. So we talked about South Kitsap Helpline is received funding to help with their new food bank they're working on. Heritage Apartments, they received 2025 funding to do some exterior work on those. And then countywide housing programs, we have KCR's weatherization and Housing Kitsap single family rehab. And then some services, South Kitsap Helpline and KCR's business education support and training. So those are just some projects to highlight that happen down the portage or provide services countywide. And then next slide. And then those are the links. And you can also reach Shannon. She's S-Bond at kitsap.gov. So any of us can provide you with information. If you need a flyer or anything to be able to put out, just let us know. We can provide that if you guys want something put out here. Anything you can put on your website or anything. Just the more that it gets out there, it's helpful.
Jay?
So and Mary might want to jump in on this one. There's been a lot of concern about federal funding, both, what's been promised or obligated and actual delivery. I know that, with the timeline you have, the dollars you're looking at in the future don't start coming in until, approval in October. But do you have any concerns right now on current projects with dollars that haven't been issued yet or received by you yet?
Well, certainly 2025 projects, because there's no budget, so we don't know what's going to come in and what's going to happen. So I would say certainly those, it's just really unknown. Projects that were awarded funds prior to this year, if everything holds true, there are already funds that are allocated, so they should be okay. But I can't speak to it.
There's a lot of unknown.
Yeah, no, I was just concerned whether,
I don't know.
yeah, I just didn't know if, there's anything that commitment-wise or not that could be an issue right now.
So we don't, so even prior to 2025 funds, we don't, especially under home, we can't contract until all funding is in place.
Okay.
And everything is a conditional commitment.
Right.
So that's in our policy plan, even anything says, it's subject to availability of federal funds, so.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Bond?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, under the CDBG,
the sidewalks where we could look, you assume the neighborhood's using the sidewalk, so you can make an argument that it's just this census tract that's needs to be looked at, so. Yeah, community centers are a little bit tricky in that regard. Because the only other way would be if all of the services that were provided in the community center were serving low-income folks.
The library somewhat
So
falls.
like, if a portion of like Village Greens was one of the seniors, would a portion be, I guess they would be eligible for very much then? Because Village Greens, I think, has a whole portfolio of.
Yeah, they're doing, they got the Boys and Girls Club, but things that, our community center, really, the only services that we're providing is the library. And beyond that, it's an event space, which
Yeah.
probably doesn't
Yeah.
fit into your box, I don't think.
I mean, half the building's a library.
But half the
Half the
building.
building is.
Yeah, I just don't know if libraries
But
are
the
eligible.
library still would be, it's open to everybody, so it
Yeah.
absolutely,
Yeah.
it triggers the census tracts for.
Right.
Well, thank you. We appreciate you coming.
Well, you know how to reach us if you have further questions about anything, and we will make sure to send that info in our annual report.
Thanks for your time tonight. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
I forgot to do QR code groups.
Yay.
You're welcome to stick around and listen about impact fees, but I understand if you have other commitments.
But I've had my.
Oh, Joel, that was rather decisive. No.
All right, let everybody get settled and.
You got the chair.
I don't know what I'm trying to do here, but it sounds like.
Not all these chairs are created equal.
Remember, if there's a broken chair, take it and chuck it.
Broken, it's just not painted back there.
All right, our next item is, the state has, legislation was passed last year that will cause us to restructure how we charge our park impact fees. And Mr. Bond has a presentation for you. The Finance Committee heard this presentation earlier this evening, so sorry it's a repeat for a few of you, but I think it's good information. So take it away, Mr. Bond.
All right. Oh, yeah, I do have a handout of the presentation. I wasn't sure how the font size would be for all of you, so it's going to be on the screen. You can try to follow along in the packet. I did correct a couple of spelling errors in that from my earlier meeting, so
Some people might find it
almost the
distracting.
same document. So as the mayor mentioned, in 2023, the legislature passed two separate bills dealing with impact fees. One of them was Senate Bill 5258, and this bill set out that by June 30th of 2025, so just a few months from now, all jurisdictions that charge impact fees shall charge it using a rate structure that proportionately lowers the fees for smaller housing units. And it requires that impact fees be based on either square footage, the number of bedrooms, or the trips generated for the particular housing unit. Transportation impact fees are the only type of impact fees that use trip generation, and so for parks, we're talking about just square footage and the number of bedrooms. Separately, the legislature also passed a bill trying to incentivize the creation of accessory dwelling units, and we're working through the land use aspects of that through a separate ordinance, but one of the provisions that made its way into that law states that the city or county cannot assess impact fees on the construction of an ADU that's greater than 50% of the impact fee that would be imposed on the principal unit. And so this is, I think the legislature, when they passed this, they weren't sure if the other bill would pass. So the other bill that uses square footage in bedrooms already lowered the impact fee for accessory dwelling units. But this law adds a separate layer that says you also have to do a test, look at what the principal unit would cost, and then make sure that you're not charging more than 50% of that amount. And And so the proposal that we have for you addresses both the rate structure as well as creating a safety valve to make sure that we don't overcharge relative to what the law allows on accessory dwelling units. So our existing park impact fee rate schedule is displayed on the screen here, and this is the March 1st, 2025 rate schedule. We have a CPI adjustment that goes into effect on March 1st. We've determined, I believe, the rate adjustment was 2.7% year over year, and so this is the updated rate schedule that is not yet in effect, but would be in effect by the time we're actually having a hearing and considering an ordinance for adoption. So the existing rate schedule already has sort of a stratified structure where different units charge different amounts. So we do have lower amounts in place now for apartments compared to single-family dwellings, but the challenge is that it's not one of the two approved methods under the new law using either square footage or bedrooms. Our existing structure is based on our parks plan, and our parks plan established a level of service that seeks to maintain our current amount of parks and facilities per capita. As the city grows, we need to make sure that the park system grows proportionately with it so that we're not having more people using the same amount of parks. And so the rates that you see here, the $6,482 for a single-family residence, this is based on an assumption that the average single-family residence contains 2.84 residents. A duplex is at 2.05 residents, and so each of these has been prorated down from that single-family rate to a lesser rate based on the assumed occupancy. So our task now is to convert this existing fee study from a per capita or per resident impact fee rate structure into a per square footage or a per bedroom structure. And so I've presented two alternatives for you. I'm calling them in the memo that's in your packet option 1, which is a square footage rate, and then option 2 is the per bedroom rate. And I'm going to walk you through each of these. There's several alternatives under each option. So using the per square footage rate, first of all, what we need to do is we need to look at that current impact fee rate, the $6,482, and we're going to be dividing that by our average square footage per house to come up with a rate that is per square foot. If you look at the historic data on construction, we've been collecting square footage data going back to 2004. You'll see that this data really shifted upward around 2016, 2017, and that corresponds to the sale of McCormick Communities, or McCormick Woods to McCormick Communities that occurred in 2016, and the resumption of development in McCormick Woods, where you typically see larger houses than what we had seen historically in other parts of the city. We annexed McCormick Woods in 2009, and then very little development happened for the first 7 or 8 years after annexation until it was sold and a new developer came in and started building houses. So you see a pretty big jump in 2017. During this period of higher than average size development, we also had the COVID pandemic and a huge amount of teleworking where people suddenly wanted to work from home, have extra space in their home for home offices. And we also saw historically low interest rates, which have since gone up a little bit. And so I think the tailing off that you see at the end of this graph in house size maybe is related to construction costs and interest rates as well as a return to the office. The other thing to consider with the per square footage rate is that most houses have an attached garage now when they're built, and that is an unconditioned space. And some houses have a 2-car garage, some houses have a 3-car garage. Our historic data is total square footage inclusive of garages, and so there's really no way to determine without going back through every plan that we have in the files and measuring how big was the average garage size. And so what I'm proposing in this option is that we make an assumption about garage size that it's usually around 500 square feet. That's an oversized 2-car garage. It's a little smaller than your typical 3-car garage, and we see a pretty good mix of 2- and 3-car garages on the houses that are being built today. I'd say it's probably around 2.4, 2.5 car garages, and usually they're putting a little bit of storage space in the garage in front of where you park a car for all the junk that we tend to accumulate these days. So we looked back at the averages, and when considering the per square footage rate, you can use any average that chooses to. We can use the 2-year average of 2,566 square feet, or if we use average house size goes down to 2407. And so because of the major shift in development patterns, we're recommending that we just throw out the 10 and 21-year averages and only focus on the last 6 years, because we believe what's happened over the last 6 years is indicative of what's going to happen going forward. And so the range, it's not huge, but when you use the square footage, you're going to take the $6,400 single-family impact fee rate, and then the average square footage, you're dividing by the average square footage to come up with a rate per square foot. And the range is from $2.45 a square foot up to $2.53 under the square foot alternative. We're recommending the 4-year average be used. We think that in the last 2 years, the other thing that's been a little bit different is that McCormick West and McCormick North have been developing. Those houses are a little bit smaller than what you see in Woods. There are other phases of McCormick Woods that are going to start coming back in here in coming years, and so we think that average may bump upward as you have more development on the golf course. So I think the 4-year average is a good average to use. And then this table is very small on the screen here, but I did provide it. I've actually blown it up for the 4-year average that we're recommending. And so you can see what the current rate would be for a whole variety of housing sizes and types using the existing current rate schedule. And then next to that, using the 4-year average of $2.49 a square foot, you can see how that fee has changed. And so anything that's red is going up, anything that's green is going down. And the 4-year net column shows how much is going up or down for each of these examples. And so one of the things that you'll notice is that all of the middle housing types are benefiting, even if they're the larger middle housing types, and it's only larger single-family houses that are essentially paying the price. And I'm going to get into the pros and cons of this alternative versus the per bedroom approach, but just notice that the range, the differential is as high as increasing by $5,900 and decreasing by, I think there's a $3,500 here is the largest decrease. And so it's a pretty diverse amount of change that is occurring under the per square footage recommendation. When we look at the per bedroom alternative, option 2 we're calling it, when you look at the data, you actually don't see the number of bedrooms changing until 2020. And so in 2017, when home building resumed at McCormick Woods, I think the first phase was Elvin Trails, which is off of St. Andrews. The houses there are pretty big, but they actually don't contain more bedrooms than what we've historically seen. It was only when people started teleworking that we saw this demand for larger houses with more bedrooms. And so you'll see that spike in 2020, and it's tapered off a little bit maybe as the return to office has begun and as construction costs and interest rates have gone up. Maybe it's a little bit more expensive to build those larger homes with more bedrooms. And so the fee is dropping off. We're also, as I mentioned, seeing the development in McCormick West and McCormick North, which have slightly smaller lots than what you see in McCormick Woods. So when you look at the averages over a 2, a 4, a 6, or a 10-year period, the range in average bedroom size is from 3.7 bedrooms per house up to 4 bedrooms per house. And we really think that this last 4-year average is probably indicative of future patterns, especially with the return to development in McCormick Woods proper. And so that's the average that we're recommending. But when you take those average number of bedrooms divided from the current impact fee rate, you're seeing about $1,616 up to $1,760 per bedroom as a possible rate. And again, we're recommending the use of the 4-year average. So I have another similar table, and I'm going to zoom in on the one that you can actually see, which is I've blown this up, hopefully large enough that you can kind of see it. You'll see that the largest houses have a smaller increase, and the middle housing types, it really depends on whether you have 2 bedrooms, in which case the fee goes down slightly, or if you have a 3-bedroom unit, it goes up slightly. And so the numbers are much tighter to our current rate schedule, which I think gives us a little bit more predictability in terms of hitting revenue forecasts and making sure that we have money to actually build the park improvements that we're going to see in the future. So when you're considering the alternatives, I want to emphasize the square footage approach definitely creates a stronger incentive for middle housing, because the middle housing types are all getting a discount, even the larger middle housing types. In terms of fairness, park impact fees are supposed to pay for the actual impact of a housing unit on our park system. And I think that there are a lot of houses that get built, and you saw this early in McCormick Woods, where maybe you have empty nesters who are building a 3-bedroom house, but it's 4,000 square feet because they have large entertaining space, they have a large living room, a large kitchen, and so they aren't necessarily having a high persons per household number, but they are having a high amount of square footage. I think a 3-bedroom apartment and a 3-bedroom house are probably likely to have close to the same number of people living within the walls of that house, which translates to our park impact fee, which is ultimately a per capita measure. It's based on maintaining our existing level of service based on the number of residents. So I think per bedroom may be a little bit more equitable, just in terms of the actual impact of the housing unit on the park system. I mentioned that the per bedroom approach has less range in terms of the high and the low under the new fee structure. I think it's probably a little bit easier to forecast revenue. The other thing that is a huge consideration for my staff is that ultimately to implement either one of these systems, we're going to have the developer provide us with information on their application form. We can take them at their word, or we can verify it. Counting bedrooms is a lot easier than counting the amount of square footage and actually verifying that the number given on the application form matches what's on the plans. I also think that this whole issue of finished versus unfinished space creates room for some debate. People may argue that they're putting in a storage room, or they're trying to put in some sort of space. I think by calling it conditioned versus unconditioned, we maybe get around that. But I think there is some room for debate. Is the space in between rooms the 6 inches of wall? Do we charge against that? Is it the perimeter of the house? I think there's a lot of room for argument. Bedrooms is pretty straightforward because bedroom is defined in the IDC, the IRC. You have an egress window, a door, and a closet, and that makes it a bedroom in terms of the IRC measurement. So I think that unless we're going to administratively not verify information, the per bedroom approach is much easier for us to implement, and is just less room for disagreement. So the recommendation that I've made in my memo to the City Council, and also which was supported by the Finance Committee earlier tonight, is to use the 4-year average in the per bedroom approach, and then that would mean a park impact fee of $1,616.73 per bedroom. And then to address the ADU requirement, we've provided code language in the last 2 pages of your packet that proposes to kind of create that safety valve, that in the event an ADU is more than 50% of what would be charged against the primary house, we have a way to manually reduce that so that it is capped at that 50% limit. And so that code language has been reviewed by the city attorney and is suitable going forward. I will say that the school district is also doing this exercise, and they're still a few months away from probably having something ready to present to council. I think maybe April that could occur. So we're proposing to amend the code for the ADU provision and adopt a new park impact fee rate under a new ordinance. And then the school district's going to bring forward their proposal, and we will have to consider their recommendation, which could use a square footage or a bedroom approach. We just haven't seen, I've seen their raw data analysis. I haven't seen the technical memo that actually explains what I'm looking at in their spreadsheet. And so I'm still waiting for that to come in, and we'll consider that separately. So right now, we do need to have a public hearing on this before we can adopt, and so March 11th is the first meeting where we could take this up. I'm proposing that if council supports the staff and finance committee recommendation, that this go to public hearing at the city council on the 11th of March with action to follow the hearing. And if you were to get testimony, you could always postpone that action, but the hope would be that people would submit their comments in writing. And then the final point, I have met 3 times with the Home Builders Association about this. They intend to write a letter. They have not written that letter yet. I think that they might have a slight preference for the square footage approach, and I think just speculating, I think that their members who are active in the organization, they do build some multifamily housing. I think the square footage approach, because it targets middle housing and apartments, gives them probably a larger discount than they might get under the per bedroom approach. And so I think that the national home builders aren't super active there, who are building most of the single family homes so the national home builders probably prefer the per bedroom approach. The people who build apartments probably prefer the square footage approach. Ultimately, I think the fairest approach is to look at how do we capture the actual impact of the people living in the building on our park system, and to me, the per bedroom approach is the fair way to go. So.
Jay?
Yeah, just real quickly, did you cover all the answers to the questions of what the Finance Committee had for you today in your updated presentation?
I hope so.
Okay, no, I was just asking because sometimes.
They're going to
just
have to
make sure-
point it out if I
yeah.
did not.
And the second thing is, I do like the approach for the bedrooms. Makes a little bit more sense of what we're trying to capture, as you said, with people living there. So the information is really very interesting, and the data, so well thought out, and appreciate the information, Nick.
Yeah, the only thing I may have forgotten to mention is that this fee structure is only going to be in place for probably 3 years tops. We, to remain eligible for RCO grant funding, which is a state agency that provides us with park grants, we have to have a certified parks plan that's no more than 6 years old. And so we passed our plan in 2022, which means in 2028 we have to have a new plan. We will touch the park impact fee rate study at that time. And so that the consultant who prepares that plan will also do the rate study, and they may, after seeing how this new method of park impact fees goes, maybe there's some appeals. I think we'll have clear direction and they can do a more comprehensive look at this. I'm mostly trying to build off of the existing rate study and convert that into a rate structure that complies with law for this next 2 to 3 years.
Go ahead.
Sure, so, good work. No matter which option we choose, I like the 4-year option because I think COVID was a giant reset and it reflects the reality and the trends of what we're seeing today. But in evaluating the options, equity was a word that was constantly coming to mind. And for that reason, I support the per bedroom approach. And then I just wanted to mention, perhaps it'd be worthwhile for the school district to understand why we chose that approach, and maybe equity, and maybe they should be looking at it through the same lens, so that we don't have some missteps that we perceive in whatever they bring forward to us. It'd be nice to be on the same page.
Yeah, that's a great comment, and they hired FCS Group to do their analysis for them. I've gotten some raw data that leads me to believe they want to do the square footage approach. One of the challenges with the bedroom approach and the school impact fee is that the primary bedroom is likely not going to have kids in it. And so currently they collect a school impact fee based on, if it's a 1-bedroom apartment, it pays a multifamily rate, even though, there's probably not a child living in that building. So I think if they went with the per bedroom approach, they're going to have to, it's going to be how many bedrooms past the first bedroom do you have, rather than how many total bedrooms do you have, and they're going to have to structure the rate in that way. But right now, the other thing they have is they're in the county, Port Orchard, and I think they have a small sliver in Bremerton where those residents come to Port Orchard. And so they have to get 3 different jurisdictions to adopt their rate structure, and so they're trying to please 3 different bodies. I think we're the only ones that actually have an interlocal agreement with them for the collection of impact fees. And ultimately, however they do the analysis, they indemnify the city, and so I'm going to trust their professionals that they've done a correct calculation. And where I am a little concerned is if they want us to verify square footages, I think we need to make sure that our agreement indemnifies our staff if we're doing that calculation versus having the school district do it. It would be, I don't think it's reasonable to expect that the school district has staff looking at building plans and determining things. I think they're going to have to indemnify us that we can use what the builder provides and just go with it rather than
Honor system.
yeah.
Thank you for that clarification, that helps me understand the school.
If I could just interject, and I don't hope this isn't a tangent, but just to back up something that you were saying, it was really interesting the last time we did school configuration data, looking at that, it was really interesting that you had lower capita, the people were bringing in actually had more kids. That the McCormick Woods area was like 0.5 per household, and yet you had something like the Ridge, and that was running 1.5 to 2 children per household, from all the school data. So it was really kind of one of these. So when you were talking about looking at past the, the first bedroom, that it depended on where you were. So their methodology may end up being a little bit different.
And you can afford kids or a big house, but not both.
Not both.
Yes, yeah, go ahead, Councilman Down.
Oh, okay. How much did you say was the impact fee per bedroom?
Well, if we go with option 2, alternative 2, it would be $1,616.73.
Oh, okay.
And so our current rate for a single-family home, if you go with a 4-bedroom house, it's currently $6,482.92, or it will be as of March 1st. It's going to go down to $64.66, so that's a reduction of $16 for a 4-bedroom house.
Now, this is a little off topic, but I'm just kind of curious, you know how we did all the homes, like the old McCormick had bigger yards, and then pretty much all the new construction of the homes have smaller yards. Was there a survey on that, or how did that come about, where you didn't really have much?
It's not relevant.
Oh, it's not, no, it's not relevant, I was just curious how, it's just the builder gets to decide, right, on that?
Yeah, I mean, the growth management encourages us to densify our city, which means more homes per acre, which usually means either smaller homes with yards or large homes with small yards, but not both.
We have an existing parks plan that generates X number of fees, which was generated by the projected growth that we have for the city. This state law, all we're doing is seeking that same, what we hope is our projection, and changing the methodology on how we're going to collect it, whether it's on the square footage or the staff's recommendation that's supported by the finance committee to go on the per bedroom approach.
Right.
The class is in.
Yeah, when I go into communities, which I do literally every day, and I'm gonna use our city. The neighborhoods in our city have large parks. The Ridge has large parks. You have a nice sized park. Obviously, we have many parks and large parks. The apartment complexes have, yeah, we're talking, it's
Tot lot, yeah.
yeah, just enough for a big toy, right? I mean, so the apartment complexes, I don't want to say apartment complexes, multifamily, but they're the ones, for the most part, I would imagine would benefit the most from having more parks out there. A lot of us have them in our neighborhoods now, and so I'm totally down with going per bedroom, apartment complexes, straight multifamily, residential, straight across, because I'm always down to pay my fair share. But I think they would benefit greatly by having better parks in our community. Am I off on that, do you think, or?
Well, I think a couple of thoughts on that. I don't think you're off. I think
Okay.
We do have a minimum standard for active on-site open space where you can actively recreate as part of an apartment complex. We don't have the same standard for single-family housing. So the private parks that are provided in single-family developments are not a requirement. They're just something that has occurred historically. I think if a single-family development came in now, it's hard to make the project pencil and provide a park. But the park impact fee in the pros plan, if they were to dedicate that park as public and make improvements to a public standard, they can get an impact fee credit. So they would actually reduce the impact fee owed per house within their neighborhood by providing that, but it has to be open to the whole community. It can't be just a privately maintained facility. So there is an opportunity for credits there, but I think you're right that, at least historically, if you compare what the Ridge has in terms of active open space and parks to what our apartment complexes have, it's probably, you have more park per person in the Ridge than you do in an apartment complex.
Yeah, you have probably about, I'm gonna throw it out there, probably 400 doors at the Ridge, roughly. And the park complex could be 300 doors. Be at their green space is significantly different. So, yeah, that's all I have to offer.
I'll just add, I think that there's a bit of a societal perspective as well. Health in the built environment involves active and passive pursuits. And so if we can build these things for people,
Yeah.
it does promote a healthier society.
So are we comfortable, circling back to the task at hand, are we comfortable with the, I'm hearing,
Yeah,
Mark? Yeah, or Fred?
yeah, I also, would we be able to capture as much revenue in this new system as the old one? And we don't know. So what made
It's
it
designed to
comfortable-
capture the same revenue.
It's projected.
Yeah, if behavior doesn't change, if the developers don't suddenly say, oh, I can lower my cost if I turn this bedroom into a den, we'll collect the same revenue. But if behavior changes at all, it's gonna be slightly less, or it could be slightly more, but it's to be seen. But it's structured based on what has happened historically to bring in the same amount of revenue.
And I'm no real estate agent, but I mean, for $1,600 to turn a bedroom into a den would really go off the
On a
price.
$750,000 house is not a good investment.
Well, if I'm,
Go ahead.
if I'm not mistaken, we've got 3 years before we review this entire program again. And if we see behavioral changes in the next 3 years with this program, then we
Just
make
make
some
adjustments.
changes necessary.
If I see the average change, I will certainly let you know about it and say, hey, the average house size in 2025 really plummeted and took the average down. Maybe we should consider revising what we're using as a denominator and increasing the per bedroom fee. We can absolutely do that if the data suggests that we're gonna fall short of our projected revenue.
I did have a question. Was there an analysis of, like, let's say, a snapshot of May 2024 under this rate? If we have the number that was developed, could we extrapolate what would be captured with the new rates?
I started that analysis for the
Is that
finance
possible?
department, but I think that they realized that by using the historical averages, it's going to produce the same thing. But yeah, I don't know that they've crunched the numbers. I think they looked at it and realized that they were doing an unnecessary
Well, it
exercise.
would be hard to do, because for May, for example, let's say in 1 month, we would know like the number of units in each of the old categories, like manufactured home.
But that's how we devised the number that we're using here. So that's what he's saying, it was a futile deal because we extrapolated that number to come up with the
Reverse engineering.
$1,600, yeah.
Unless, yeah, I think the thing that could happen is if we had a development come in that was nothing but 2 and 3 bedroom houses, that could blow things up because we assumed a different average, but it's all based on an average, and as long as we continue hitting our average, the revenue should cut in just fine.
I mean, actually, on the face of it, it looks like it's lowering the impact fees for like a single family dwelling, independent of the number of bedrooms.
Yeah.
So-
Yeah, except we're having a ton of 5 bedroom houses come in. It's, I counted how many of each bedroom type and sent that to the finance department and said, here's the raw data on what we did in 2023. Are you concerned? And, I think they just realized that it wasn't worth the exercise.
Okay, so the first meeting in March, while I'm on vacation, you're gonna have a gavel in your hand to conduct this public hearing.
Okay, when in March?
For our-
John's backing you up. John's back in charge.
Don't tell them yet.
Another 30-minute meeting, John's in charge.
No, John was not a 30-minute meeting.
So, it's the second Tuesday in March.
Okay.
The 11th,
I'm here for
I'm
it.
guessing, yeah.
All right.
So,
Right now, you're here.
Probably need to come take notes from you is what I'm understanding.
Take away his gavel, it was much too loud.
and you get to swing the gavel, we're having a public hearing.
There we go.
Okay, so the plan is to have a public hearing that evening,
Mhm.
take testimony. You're not going to vote on it that evening.
Well, no, they will be able to vote on it.
You will be able to vote.
If they receive testimony that is so, persuasive that they want to change direction, then we can talk about
Okay.
what to do, and we can potentially continue it, but.
So the plan is then to vote, take a public hearing and take a vote that
Sure,
evening.
you got it.
Okay?
Does Mayor Pro Tem get with them when he's?
Yes, he does. Yes, he does.
If there's a tie.
Yep, not even if it's a tie, you vote.
Okay.
You vote.
So do we only have 1 week out to get the message out to the public?
Well,
Or
he's
have
been
you-
doing
No,
out-
I'm gonna
he's been doing
run on
outreach for
Friday or
months.
Monday, and it'll be, so Friday is, what is today, the 18th, so
Yeah.
21st? So it'll be 20 days from the date the notice goes out.
Okay.
until
And
the
he's
hearing.
met 3 times with the pool builders already on this topic.
Yeah.
Okay, I've got a few things on my go to the order list here.
Can I just follow up? So then we're looking at code development.
You're gonna have to be more specific, there's a lot of code.
So the ADU code development. that
Oh,
was-
yeah, that'll go forward as part of the middle housing package in June.
Okay.
So that's separate, but the ordinance will be the rate schedule and just that one section of additional code that we're
Yeah,
adding in.
right, okay. I know
Oh,
we're
and-
looking at code tomorrow.
And one other question for the council. My plan was to make this ordinance, the fee schedule effective on July 1st.
Can we get consensus on that now, so we're not?
Yeah, no, I would like,
Okay, can restate it, please?
So whether we implement it before July 1st or not.
I got. I was looking for Scott's reason for
So
implementing.
we're not having this debate.
When he's up Mayor Pro Tem.
Doing on Mayor Pro Tem. If we could be on the same page for that, then.
Okay, that's,
the
I was trying to
draft
figure out.
ordinance says July 1, unless somebody tells me otherwise, we're gonna go
Yeah.
forward with
What
it.
did you want, then I mean,
July
I mean, we're
1.
generating the same revenue either way, it's just how it's being generated.
July 1.
So I was just trying to figure out the why behind it. What I'm hearing you say, Scott, is basically, if we're adopting this, then why don't we just implement it?
I suppose the reason would be that you're accelerating the incentivization of smaller, more affordable units potentially. But I think those units are already in the pipeline.
That's what I was going, is like, does it make a difference?
We're not gonna get your
July
application
1st.
approved.
July 1st, okay.
Hey, now, those folks that are
Already
already
have to be
pipeline,
in.
how will that be effective? If we modified that date?
Well, if somebody had a project with a lot of small units, they might choose to wait till July to get their permit. I suppose that's a possibility, but.
and the bigger ones may pay, if you give them that lead time to July 1, they may get.
Then they rush in to save $1,600.
So you're right at the end of the year.
So it'll be July 1st, and it sounds like. All right, I got a couple things here. One, should've gotten an email if you saw it. The AWC's annual conference, the registration opens up here in the next week or so. If you want to go, it's in Kennewick this year, and it's June 24th to 27th. And so reach out to Brandy if you want to attend and shoot her an email, and so she can reserve a block of rooms if you intend to go. In Kennewick, I know it's a journey. So that if you've driven downtown since last Thursday or Friday, there's a large generator down there on the water. It's very large, and so I've been assured, and I've seen some renderings of what all the screening looks like. So it won't stand out. It's still always going to stand out, but it won't stand out the way that it does today. So it's very tall, and it's. I had Dennis look into it. The pumps that are down there are very big, and it's a very large and expensive generator. So
Is it very loud?
but it's only going to come on
I'll say,
in a disaster.
we have to use it, no matter.
Well, they'll have to test it like.
Yeah, right. It's going to run once in a while.
You do have to, they
Yeah,
have to go
cycle.
around to run them.
They usually don't test it at midnight, though.
No, that's,
We have one right out here too.
Just saying.
The Saints Car Show, gosh, I've gotten probably 5 phone calls on that in the last week or so, and it's just quite a few people. And we're not trying to cancel their show in any way, shape, or form. And so the challenge that we're presented is they don't want to evolve in their event, and their event has grown dramatically, and the world has changed. And they want to have a free-for-all as far as when their participants leave throughout the day. And when we've got a crowd of 3,000 or 4,000 people down there, and probably at the peak, that's what we have, we shouldn't, the police department is not comfortable with cars driving in the midst of that. We've got a road closure, and solutions that we've offered are creating zones. If they wanted to create zones, from Frederick Street towards City Hall is, if you park in that zone, we move the barrier back and folks can leave that area. I hope we're not in an impasse, but, there's messages out there that we're totally for their event. We want their event. The merchants want their event, but we've got to do it in a safe manner. So I just want to share with you that. Question? Okay, all right. And last thing is I got the invoice for the farmer's market membership. We did that last year for the first time at $1,500. Want to make sure that we want to do that again this summer. I think it's good to support our farmer's market and be a member. So we all good with that? Okay, I'll get the bill paid. That's all I got. How about good of the order? Anybody else have anything for the good of the order?
Since you mentioned the farmer's market, we are planning on doing the ADU
nice.
That will enable us to do that outreach.
That's a good topic for that.
Do you know if there's any transportation update programs that we may be doing down there this year? I know that went over really well
Yeah.
a couple years back.
Maybe for Bay Street, we might have the engineers down there, and on a poster board with, you know, the road closure that would happen in a year out.
Any of that community outreach is good stuff down there. There's a lot of people, not just from Fort Orchard, but from South Kitsap,
Yeah.
that are interested in what's happening, what's going on.
It's including reminding which roads are not ours.
Maybe a map of those. So what that-
Speaking of which, have we heard anything from the state regarding the that will be done in impacting Mile Hill?
No.
Okay, so nothing, because that came up, and that was
It,
certainly, I know it's.
gosh, it's been
possibly 3
more
years
than
out.
a year. They came to us
Right.
and asked us, okay, we have two alternatives. One is a complete road closure for, I don't know, 9 months.
Yeah.
And the other one is, we've gotta build two bridges, and we keep the road, and it would cost them considerably more money, and the timeline would be longer, you know, for the construction, but we're like, you can't close Mile Hill.
Right, that's what
So was our feedback, so.
Okay, but you haven't heard any more, because that kind of came up.
I did hear something about this, and that is that, so there are 5 culvert projects that are being bid together, and one of them is the Gorse culvert, which I think is potentially starting, I think I heard this summer.
Right,
Next summer?
yep.
Brutal.
Yeah, I think it's this summer that the Gorse one is starting, and that's one of the 5 that the same contractor is doing, and so I don't know if he's doing them in sequence or not, but at least one of those 5 is gonna start this summer, I believe.
Right, but I just didn't know if we had heard anything, because it was kind of like, this is how the state's moving, and I'm going, that's nice.
Sometimes the crews just show up, we don't.
Oh,
Dennis might have information. Bob Dunn.
Yes.
What's that?
Dennis?
Stated that they're not.
I'm gonna reach out to the state, and the last I heard, they were just doing exploratory borings out there, so I will get an update for everybody.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dennis,
I'll
appreciate
just
it.
say, whoever's doing the fish passages, like Sedgwick, who did, what, Olala, I mean, my goodness gracious, like, there's never an inconvenience, I mean, the way they do it.
And just remember that the state did our roundabout downtown, too.
I understand, I'm trying to give credit to other contractors doing it, cause like, it's just smooth, you know, I mean,
You mentioned Gorse, which made me wonder about.
I didn't, but somebody did, yes.
Somebody mentioned Gorse, but how are we with the Gorse transportation planning? I know that took a hiatus.
Well, no, it's not, it's just that there's a lot to do right now.
Yeah.
So it got a chunk of whether state or federal money, it might be federal money that flows to the state, which happens, for the environmental process and the preliminary design, okay? And so there isn't, so that's gonna take a few years. And so from that the environmental review process and the outreach, and the preliminary design will inform the bigger design of what happens there.
Okay.
So just to let you know, Mr. Scott, that I was Mason Transit's rep on the Gorst project in 2008.
Well, I know that when it last came to life, which was pre-COVID, it had, I think $500 million price tag. Well, we know that's out the window.
So there's a washout project page for the 5 culverts.
Right.
It says start of construction spring of '26, end of construction spring or winter of '29.
Right,
And
3-year
so,
window.
yeah, so it's no earlier than spring of '26.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that-
All right. Moving on from Gorse. Go ahead.
Oh, well, and this has to do with the farmer's market, so it's kind of interesting. I'm so glad that our city partners.
Hey, guys. He has the floor.
This has to do with the farmer's market, and I was saying I'm so glad that the city partners with them. I'm actually going to go to the conference this Friday, and it's WSFMA, so it's Washington State Farmers Market Association. I'm going to help Erica, who is the president of the farmers market, and we're gonna do a workshop together. And so, and James Weaver, he's gonna be a guest speaker there too. And yeah, this is pretty big program new on